How's it going? Phil Murphy here in the ESPN Esports studio, and a happy Lunar New Year. A break comes early into the LCK and LPL seasons, which is a great time to check in on the two best regions in League of Legends. Emily Rand is here to ham it up and bring us up to speed. So Emily, let's look at the top of the LCK, Griffin, Sandbox, and SKT. Griffin's in its sophomore year, but Sandbox came out of nowhere. The only remnant of the old guard in that top three is SKT. What's going on?
So I don't think Griffin are too much of a surprise since they did really well last year and have kind of been at the vanguard of this transition period that we've seen the LCK going through. SKT has actually kind of struggled to the expectations, which were, in fairness, like very large. I was one of those people putting those expectations on them with this new kind of super team lineup that they had going into this split. Sandbox is the real surprise. Like, if you remember 3 weeks ago, I said that they were, or 2 weeks ago, I said that they were going to be the team that would drop down. That team actually turned out to be Damwon, and the difference has definitely been in their early game proactivity. So Sandbox are still making a lot of the mistakes that I kind of called them out for in how they trade objectives or some funky back timings, disregard for vision. However, their team fighting and also their proactiveness early has really served them well, especially as all these other LCK teams are really trying to struggle to have that same proactivity.
Emily, going back to the old guard mentality, Jinair, Afrika, Gen.G aren't exactly making bacon. They all sit in the bottom. What can these teams do to turn around their seasons after the break?
I'm appreciating how you're weaving in all the pig puns.
I don't know what you're talking about.
For those that don't know, it's the year of the golden pig for this year's Lunar New Year. So, but I think a lot of it, so I was talking with Ashley Kong, who is our LCK kind of not only expert, but she does a lot of the interviews at the venue for us. And she brought up a really good point in that a lot of these coaching staffs haven't necessarily changed, especially the people at the top. And we've seen that teams have kind of inherited the play style of their previous coaching staffs. So, for example, one of the more frustrating things to watch about SKT is that they have all these proactive players. You know, Mada was incredibly aggressive early when he was on KT. He was one of the people who were designing their early game to be that aggressive, along with pushing lanes and draft. Teddy is an incredibly strong laner. Khan is an incredibly strong laner. Faker, previously has been known for just out trading and being super aggressive in the mid lane, even with champions that you wouldn't think would be super proactive, like a Lulu, for example, back in Season 5. And then you have Klid, who was super aggressive on JDG, and yet we saw them against Griffin, and they just did not do anything early. So I think a lot of these older orgs are kind of struggling with how to transition to a more proactive play style or playing around their solo lanes a bit better and not necessarily waiting for those scaling team fights.
Emily, let's jump to the LPL and look at their top three. FPX, IG, and Suning. IG, we expected to be there. They're the reigning world champions, but FPX and Suning are a little bit more surprising, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, they were both lineups that on paper you look at them and you're like, these are really strong lineups, but we're not sure how they're going to perform, right? And Suning, for example, brought over Sword Art and Maple from the LMS, and they kept their top side. And they got SMLZ, who's an incredibly strong AD carry, previously played for Rogue Warriors last year. I think FPX, you see something similar where you have Doinby coming to this team with an already very strong bot lane, and they kind of have the pieces, but they hadn't figured it out yet. And again, like, to continue on the theme of proactivity, I know it's become kind of this annoying buzzword when we've been talking about League of Legends this year, but all of these teams are incredibly aggressive early. And that's typically where they like to get their advantages, and they're really smart about getting those advantages usually. So even as these teams are coming together, they're very exciting to watch. And it's been nice to see some of these on-paper lineups actually play really well together in the game.
Emily, over to the bottom part of the LPL, which now has 16 teams, remember. OMG, Snake, LGD. I'll ask the same question. How can these teams turn around their seasons?
Snake is so frustrating to watch because I actually think that they are better than their 1-4 record shows, and they had a good series against IG, you know, about as well as you could have expected going up against Invictus Gaming. Snake just have this, you know, this part in the game where they just kind of lose their minds and choose like either really bad team fights or, you know, all go in one by one and kind of end up dying or pressure something too much. So I think I'm not sure if that is necessarily going to change because it's been a hallmark of Snake, you know, this kind of inconsistent, sometimes overly aggressive style when they need to be a little bit more patient. I think for a lot of these other bottom teams, LGD just needs to figure out like who they want to start and how that team's going to come together. Because I think right now they're shuffling through a lot of pieces. They're trying to find a lineup and it's just like nothing is working for them. Similarly, OMG, we've seen kind of flashes of something that could be there, but even unlike other teams like Vici and Rogue Warriors, who are also down towards the bottom, those teams are full of young talent that just isn't as experienced yet, right? So those are the two, Rogue Warriors and Vici are actually the two kind of, I guess, quote unquote, bottom tier teams that I'm looking at to see how they can improve because they have a lot of young talent from the LDL that's new to the LPL.
Last question for you, Emily. If you had to pick your world qualifiers from these two regions today, and I'm asking, so you kind of do have to pick, who do you see making it?
So I think for Korea, it would still be Griffin. I do think SKT would make it. It's the third team that's like still really questionable for me. I'm still uncertain as much as I do like Sandbox and I do want to give them credit because I was really harsh on them initially. I'm not sure how well they can sustain what they've been doing if they don't make those changes, right? Which also comes from experience. So they are an interesting team to watch. Keep your eye on them. But then we also have like peeking in Kingzone, who is doing surprisingly well. I was also incredibly harsh on them. And Hanwha Life, who, if people remember, actually barely missed playoffs both times last year. So it's the third team that I'm really, really unsure about. Without major roster changes, I don't see like Gen G or KT kind of coming up the ranks. So I don't know. I'll like go out on a random limb so people can either come back and hate, like make fun of me hardcore, or be like, oh, she called it. I'm gonna go with Hanwha Life. I really like their early game. They just need to solve their mid-game shot calling issues.
Emily Rand with all the answers we need, letting us know how the sausage is made. Thanks again, Emily. For more League of Legends coverage, keep it locked here on ESPN.com/esports.